Welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me is Ross Grimsley, as he is each and every Monday night. Ross, I like that number 48 Cincinnati Reds uniform. Your poor Reds, 3-19 right now, Ross.
They're struggling big time, aren't they? You hate to see. I hate to see any team get off that bad a start, but yeah, it's
3-19 is about as bad as I can.
That's
remember.
Not good. Well, and them the two teams I played for, in the '70s, the Orioles and the Reds. The Orioles got off that terrible start. I forget what year it was.
1988.
Right. You can't start off
0-21.
It's really tough to bounce back after that. But
anyway,
you hate to see it.
Our guest tonight is our managing editor at PressBox, Luke Jackson. And Luke, aside from being an incredibly knowledgeable baseball person who really has a scout's eye for the game, he's also a damn good writer. And he also turns my pablum that I spoon out every week into something that's readable for our audience. Luke joins us. Luke, you have penned the 274th cover story in the history of PressBox. It's called "It Takes a Leader," and that quote or that line came from Mike Elias. We set out to have you do this piece on Adley Rutschman because everybody is expecting him to be like this really almost transformative player, but they mostly emphasize his offense, like he's a switch hitting catcher. He hits with power. We dug in and thought it would be an interesting angle to look at what he might be able to do to help the pitching of the Baltimore Orioles. And Luke, what did you find?
Yeah, so just to piggyback on what you were saying before, I think you're absolutely right in that we had talked about a few angles that we could do. We talked about the pressure of being the number one pick, the pressure of being the number one prospect in baseball. But we thought that had been discussed, including by us ad nauseum, that had been written about by pretty much everyone. And we thought that at this point, that was a well-worn storyline. So we wanted to go in another direction. We had also talked about, well, this guy could be a hell of a hitter at the catcher position. But if you've ever played fantasy baseball, you understand, you get it, how valuable it is to have a catcher who can hit. Anyone who's played 1 year of fantasy baseball knows how valuable that is. Anybody who's watched baseball at all knows how valuable that is. So what Stan decided was that we should really look at the defense and in the leadership aspect of the catcher position and how he can help develop Orioles pitching well into the future. And so that's what we decided on. And in reporting this story, it was one of those stories that everyone you talked to sort of had something additional to say before you ended the conversation. It was always, one more thing. And so it was a really enjoyable story to write about. And in the angle that we talked about, you mentioned it takes a leader, right? And that is something that Mike Elias said. That was a quote from Mike Elias in talking about what he was looking for out of a catcher when he was scouting Adley when he was at Oregon State. And so in talking, like I said, in talking to a lot of different people, this was a super enjoyable story to write. And really the content was such that the story really wrote itself.
And Rick can attest to this because Rick pitched in the big leagues for about 16 years. One of the things that I pointed out, I wanted you to talk to Rick Dempsey, and then we were looking for an ex-Oriole pitcher to talk to. And I said, what would really make sense would be to talk to Steve Stone, who actually is benefited from a better defensive team with a really good defensive catcher who had an idea how to plot out a game. And you talked to both of them. And what did you find that Steve Stone said about why he went from being kind of a journeyman pitcher to, in his couple of years for the Orioles, he went like 38-17 or something like that.
So just to take a step back for a minute, the angle of the story that we originally settled on that I was going to talk to like a few former major league catchers. I was going to talk to a few former major league pitchers about the role of the catcher and kind of weave Rutschman into that. What ended up happening was that I talked to Adley's dad, And I had talked to people who knew the family. And because of that, the story changed a little bit. And the story really became sort of, what he learned from his dad all those years ago, starting when he was like 8 years old and even before that, and then translating all that he learned from his dad, who was a catcher, who's been a catching instructor for years, and sort of translating that into the Orioles organization since he was drafted in 2019. And that's like the leadership capabilities and all the stuff that, we talk about, that I discussed in the article, meeting with pitchers, calming pitchers down, meeting with pitchers during the games, and really investing in their career, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the angle that we were going to go. So the angle that we were going to go for changed a little bit. However, I still ended up talking to a former Major League pitcher, like you said, in Steve Stone, who is the most recent Orioles Cy Young winner. And what Steve said, and like, as you said,
it was only 42 years ago.
Yeah. and there's a funny stat that I found that, from about 63 to 84, the Orioles were really the standard bearer for pitching. And 24 times from 63 to 84, they had pitchers win 20 or more games. Now they almost had 25. A young left-hander by the name of Ross Grimsley almost made it 25. Now I'm not sure what quite happened that didn't allow you to get to 20 wins, Ross, but it could have been 25. We're so close.
Oh yeah.
5. And as I was doing that research, I was like, oh no, Ross had 18 wins that year. It's so close.
That was my best year. That was even the year, it was better than the year I won 20 games in Montreal. I mean, we didn't score a lot of runs, and we had a great pitching staff, great defense. But yeah, that was very easily could have won 20 games. So could Mike Cuellar could have won a lot more too. I think he won 24 or 5. If I'm not mistaken. So we had a great defense, and catching was outstanding. It's very important.
And to your point, Ross, one of the things that Steve Stone pointed out is that early in his tenure, his first year, I believe it was 79. And then I think he won, correct me if I'm wrong, Stan, he won the Cy Young in 80, if I'm not mistaken.
25 and 7.
And so early in his tenure in 79, Rick Dempsey took him aside, and there was a little mix. They kind of had a different recollection. So I was a little vague in the story about when exactly it happened, but it definitely happened early in 79. And Rick took him to the side and said, look, and at this point, Steve had really turned into a curveball heavy pitcher. And it was like, and Rick told him, as long as you don't sail it over my head, I will block it. That if you throw any curveball in the dirt,
like with a runner on third,
so if you have a runner on third, and do not be afraid of spiking a curveball and allowing a run to score that way, or allowing a runner from second to get to third, or a runner from first to get in the scoring position. And he really impressed that upon him. And that was something that really stuck with Steve and allowed him to gain some confidence when he was throwing. And again, I think Steve said it that by the time he got to Baltimore, he was like 50 or 60% curveballs. He was a very curveball heavy pitcher. The other thing that Rick had him do sometimes would have him drop down sidearm to throw that curveball to give the hitters different angles,
different look. Yeah.
And he ended up saying that Rick was the best catcher and he said he had thrown to some other good catchers too, but Rick was the best one. Rick is the one who really allowed him to unlock his potential. And he ended up winning 25 games and winning the Cy Young. Again, the most recent Oriole to win the Cy Young. And I put that at the end of the story. The story was a little bit long, but I put that at the end so that if you made it to that point, it was a nice little reward that you had two new voices in Rick and Steve. And I also talked to Rick about this. And as you might imagine, that Rick was extremely complimentary of Steve as well, that those two had good memories of working with one another. So that was a nice little story that I was able to throw in at the end of the story, so that if you made it to that point, that was a nice little surprise that you heard from Steve and Rick.
Ross, before I let you ask a couple questions, how many times do you think Oriole pitchers the last 2 or 3 years had that kind of conversation with Pedro Severino or Chance Sisco, where they said to like a Dylan Bundy, like, hey, don't worry with a runner on third. I'm going to let that ball get to the backstop so there's no pressure on you.
Hope it bounces back and they get it. No, so it hits the cement, it bounces back.
All right. I know you read the piece. Did you have any thoughts about this angle of how good Rutschman is as a catcher?
I thought it was great. I did, talking to some of the people I know, in the scouts about him. I mean, he does so many things well. You just can't wait to see him. I mean, he is from what people he's the real deal, and he's a guy that takes a lot of pride. Obviously, you got somebody that cares behind the plate, and no one. I mean, pitching in Cincinnati with Johnny Bench, pitching in Montreal with Gary Carter. Some of my best years were, but you had guys, and like you said, you can throw anything. I mean, at one point in time, I wouldn't have tremendous stuff, but Gary Carter didn't have to put a sign down. I could throw whatever I wanted, and he was going to catch it. So just imagine, and I work very fast because, I mean, always, if you work fast, you keep the hitters off balance, and they can't get comfortable. They're always thinking about, being ready to hit all the time, and they can't get so. Just knowing that, it was very rare. Like I said, I didn't have the great stuff, but he was able to catch any ball thrown, and if you get a catcher that can do that, and one that will talk to you, especially between innings, and be able to get on the big thing with catching and pitching is a catcher that can get on the same page with the pitcher and know and that comes from studying, that comes from catching the guys in the bullpen. That's one of the things guys don't do now. Your starting catcher sometimes doesn't even catch guys in the bullpen on their throw days. That's ridiculous. I mean, there's so many things that aren't done now that would make them and help them. And I think this Rutschman kid, I mean, I don't know his father's background, where he caught, what he did, but obviously he has an idea about catching and has done a great job with this kid. And not only can he catch, he can play some first base too. He's going to DH a little bit from what I understand. That will give him a break so he can catch a little bit longer, possibly. But he does, he's a kid that he's a better left-handed hitter. He's got more power right-handed, very patient at the plate. He uses the whole field. He barrels up the ball a lot. And for a catcher, he's a very good runner, very good base runner, good instincts, athletic. I mean, he's a plus receiver, a plus blocker. He does so many things well. This guy might be the next, Hall of Fame guy if he lives up to it and does everything that he says he does. And I don't see no reason why he doesn't. It all depends on if he can stay healthy or not. And that's another thing with the issue that he got hurt in spring training. No one really knows exactly what it was or even how he did it. But from what he's doing now, it sounds like he's doing a pretty good job of getting on a fast track, and he should be in Baltimore anytime.
So can I ask you a couple questions, Ross, about catching?
Sure. Yeah.
I was talking to Grayson Rodriguez for this story, and I have a couple quotes from Grayson in there, but what I'm about to say, I couldn't fit into the story, but Grayson said there were a few things that he loves out of catchers. And I'm curious if it matches up with you. Number one, he says, a catcher who does their homework, a guy who is in the pregame meetings, who puts the work in respect to that. And like you said, is on the same page with the pitcher in terms of knowing what the pitcher likes to throw in certain situations, what the pitcher should throw in certain situations. That was number one. Number two, he said he loves a catcher whose offensive struggles don't carry behind the plate.
Right.
That he's able to separate. And this is something that I saw with Pedro Severino the past few years, is that when he was hitting well, he was catching well.
Right.
When he wasn't hitting well, he wasn't catching well either.
Right.
And so that was one thing that Grayson said. And another thing Grayson said that caught my ear was that he just doesn't like lazy catchers.
No. And you've seen so many of those guys.
Corners behind the plate. What are the kind of things that you liked out of catcher when you were pitching?
Well, no, all of that, but it's really amazing. A catcher that can obviously, like I said, get on the same wavelength that you're on, but that comes from catching the bullpen, knowing what you have, knowing what you do when you don't have your good stuff, and knowing what you do when you have your good stuff, how to make adjustments during the game. Now, pitching a guy the first inning is a little bit different than pitching a guy maybe later on, but knowing that and knowing how to make that adjustment. But as far as, going over, I'll never forget when my first year at Baltimore, McNally, Cuellar, myself, and Palmer, 3 left-handers and a right-hander. So we'd go over the first game of a series. Before that, we would go over. Well, McNally being left-handed, Cuellar being left-handed, me being left-handed, we all pitch guys different. So knowing what McNally has, McNally was a breaking ball, curveball, slider type guy with a
knowing what your pitcher that you're handling on that day,
but
his capabilities
he would pitch Cuellar, I would pitch say Reggie Jackson. We all would pitch him different because we would, and it would change because during the game we might not have a curveball, we might not have our changeup, we might not have our slider. A catcher that can recognize that and go, okay, now we got to go to plan B. It's not working, but knowing that, but that takes time. It seems like this kid is taking his time at the minor league level with these guys, showing interest and showing the ability to do this. And now getting to the big leagues obviously is a whole different ball game, but I mean, he's already doing more than most catchers would have done. I mean, he's on a track to to be able to help out immediately. It sounds like, but those little things, knowing how to make adjustments, not only pitch to pitch, but hitter to hitter, inning to inning. And that's really important. And that sounds like that's what he's doing.
And my next question was
we're talking with Luke Jackson, the managing editor of PressBox, about his cover story. It's on the newsstands now and will be until roughly June 15th. It's called It Takes a Leader. It's about Adley Rutschman and what he can bring to the table. Before we continue, I was remiss at the beginning. I was so excited to do the opening that I forgot to mention we're brought to you by the Costas Inn. Everybody in Baltimore knows the Costas Inn is one of the most famous standard restaurants for people to go sit down, watch, eat at the bar or your tables, TVs throughout the bar and the restaurant. But during the pandemic, they really stepped up their game. They now are one of the preeminent carry-out or curbside places in Baltimore. So you can still get your crabs, your crab cakes, your crab soup, steaks, chicken, salad, whatever you want at the Costas Inn. Check out their menu, their carry-out menu on the website, costasinn.com. They're located 4100 North Point Boulevard, phone number 410-477-1975. Ross, Luke had another question for you.
Right. So I was talking to Tim Cousins, who is the Orioles catching instructor at the major league level, and he compared Adley to, in terms of his intangibles early in his career, to JT Realmuto, which I thought was pretty high praise. Now, you worked with the Giants organization.
Right.
And so I'm assuming that you crossed paths with Buster Posey.
Yes, absolutely.
So what sort of qualities did he have as a catcher that maybe Adley might have as well? What did you see out of Buster that made him so successful as he was for a long period of time? Because for me, he's a Hall of Fame catcher. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
Right. No, he did a lot. I mean, at the very beginning, and seeing and listening to what people say about Rutschman, a lot of that was the same as Posey, what he did. And, he carried himself different than the other guys. He knew, he did a lot of the things. He studied the hitters. He studied the pitchers, on his team. You got, in the minor leagues, you got, 14, 15 pitchers a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Now you got to catch all these guys, and you got to know what he was able to do that. But he did a lot of the same thing. He blocked the ball. He threw well. He called a good game. He know what he wanted. He was able to make adjustments, and that's a big thing. And the other thing is I think in this day and age, pitchers pitch more away from contact than they do to contact. And I think, I think Rutschman, just listening to your article and some of the things that people have told me, that he's a guy that, that knows, to make the guys swing the bat, be aggressive, throw strikes. And that's one of the things I think the Oriole pitchers are doing. They're throwing more strikes. Obviously, they got that big wall and that deep, more. So you're going to be, and it's just natural. You're going to be more aggressive. You're not going to be afraid to throw the ball over the plate. You're always trying to make that quality pitch instead of not be aggressive. And you start trying to make quality pitches. Some of them are going to be balls. You're going to be behind in the count. And now you got to throw the ball over. If you don't, then you're going to walk the guy. And then the next guy hits a home run. You give up 2 instead of 1. You know, and I think a good catcher realizes this, and he realizes what his pitcher can and can't do, and he's able to make adjustments quickly, and that's what it sounds like this guy does.
And so
I wanted to touch, Luke, I wanted to get back to asking you some questions about the article, because I want to spark some people's interest in reading the article. His dad, I remember when they drafted him, I didn't remember hearing any of the things that his dad happened to be a catching guru. How did that come about that you found that out? I guess it's pretty obvious, but I don't remember it when he was drafted. And what impact did that have on Adley?
So, yeah, when he was drafted, I think the person you heard probably more about was his grandfather, Ad, who was a legendary. He's still with us. He's 90 years old. But from what I understand, he was like a legendary football coach back in Oregon. Now his dad had been, he coached at a Division III school called George Fox. I think he coached there for, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like 10 to 15 years. Now, prior to that, he was like at first like a player coach with the Aloha Knights, which is a summer ball team. And then he was a coach with the Knights. And prior to that, he had played in college as a catcher. And so, yeah. And when the first person I talked to for this story was Adley. And one of the questions that I had for him were, who are some of your big influences as a catcher? And he said, well, number one would be my dad. And so I said, okay, definitely going to talk to him. He said, number two would be my high school coach who caught in college. And then number three would be my pitching coach at Oregon State, who I talked.
I would have thought he would have mentioned Pedro Severino.
You would have thought that the interactions with Pedro in spring training would really spurred him. Exactly. You would have thought, but he ended up going another direction. But so he said those three guys. And so I talked to his dad, and immediately after talking to his dad, it became pretty clear to me that not only did he have a huge impact on Adley as a person and as a human being, but also on the field as a catcher, which I thought was really unique. And then in talking to others who know both Adley and his dad, it became more obvious to me that, this was a big part of the story, was how as you said, what kind of catching guru. And I didn't know, what kind of a catching guru he was. And one person just out of the blue that I talked to, Pat Bailey, who was the head coach at George Fox all those years ago, and he won a national championship in 2004 with George Fox. He said that Randy Rutschman is the best catching coach on the West Coast. I was like,
that's pretty.
That's pretty good. That's really praise.
That explains a lot. That explains a lot about Adley Rutschman.
And I will also say that I talked to his mother too, Adley's mother too. And when you talk to his parents, I talked to him for about a half hour piece. When you talk to his parents and you see the physical tools that he has, it's very obvious. It becomes very plainly obvious to me why he is who he is. Once you talk to his parents and you combine that with the physical tools that you see on the field, it's very obvious why he is who he is.
Duke, he played basketball, football. I think I read he kicked a 63-yard field goal. I mean, obviously, it's the kid played several different sports growing up, which is tremendous. Which a lot of kids don't do that now. Which I think is a deterrent to their progression as athletes. Because I mean, you learn so much, and as out of high school, one of the big, obviously, my father had a big impact on me because he played 16 years professional ball and in the minor leagues. And my high school basketball coach was a tremendous influence on me. Had nothing to do with baseball, but it did have a little bit to do with baseball and how I did things, and prepared for games and what have you, just little things. So it's a big thing. Yeah. My question, did Adley have any catching people growing up that he, what's the word I'm looking for? That he
looked up to,
patterned himself after, or, did he ever mention that?
Yeah, I would say, besides his dad, probably his high school coach, John Strohmeyer, who had caught.
Any professional people that he watched? Did he?
That's a good question. We never discussed that. A good question. See, I should have talked to you beforehand.
I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I never asked him that. What's funny is that you mentioned, Ross, that it's good that he played multiple sports.
Right.
What his dad told me is that he didn't really settle on catcher until his junior year of high school. He had played, he had pitched. I think growing up, he had pitched a little bit. He had played some third base. And that came from his dad, because his dad said he felt in his own career, his dad's own career, that he was a little pigeonholed as a catcher, because it was one of those deals where, in his little league practice, the coach asked, "Hey, does anybody want to catch?" He raised his hand.
Yeah.
20 years later, he's coaching catchers, and so he didn't want that to happen to Adley. So he had played a lot of different positions, even within baseball. And like he said, and one thing that Adley did mention is that he didn't get burned out by baseball, because he played basketball.
Played all the other sports.
He actually played football for Oregon State. He was the kickoff specialist at Oregon State.
Really?
He did that for a year. So, I mean, this is a well-rounded individual.
Big time. I mean, playing different positions in baseball. I mean, and now you're the catcher, and most catchers are in control of your shortstop are in control of the game. They see the whole thing. And playing those different positions, now he has an idea a little bit about everything, and pitching too. So that makes a little bit. But this kid is, I mean, the more you listen, the more you talk, the more he's a special guy. And hopefully he stays healthy, because he's going to be possibly really, the real deal.
Luke, before we let you get out of here, though, there's been obviously since 2018, the Orioles have been really in the crapper. I mean, there's no question about it. And any team that's going to start upon such a major rebuild that the Orioles did, it's going to be painful.
Right.
I think people are a little bit exhausted with it, but I think they're forgetting that the pandemic season cost a lot of the prospects in the Oriole organization a full season of baseball, where their development was kind of left up to them in some way, shape, or form. So before we get out of here, we saw Bradish the other night pitch for the Orioles, and I was impressed. We know that Rutschman is probably going to be up here, I'd say by mid-May, like May 15th to May 20th.
Mid to late May, that sounds about right.
But you've had the unique opportunity. One of the nights I sat with you, tell us in your eyes who some of the prospects you see in the organization, because I really do think there really is, I hate to use that cliche, light at the end of the tunnel. What I see is not light at the end of the tunnel. I see the pipeline being filled with really useful and in some cases special talent players.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And so last week, I think it was Wednesday of last week, Stan and I went to the Aberdeen game. And we saw Rutschman rehab. He was DHing that day. I think if I remember correctly, he hit 3 balls hard. He didn't get rewarded for any of them. One was a laser to center field to the wall that just happened to be caught. It was a really nice play. We also saw Colton Cowser hit a single, double, and triple. We saw Kobe Mayo hit a home run.
A monstrous home run.
And Aberdeen has some other really nice ball players there. I know you were really impressed by Colin Burns, who is the shortstop at Aberdeen. He was drafted last year. Dante Williams is a good looking.
He's a nice player. Yeah.
John Rhodes is a good looking ball player. So this Aberdeen team has a lot of really good players.
Yeah.
And it's the best Aberdeen team that I've seen in quite some time, certainly since 2013 when Mike Yastrzemski was there and Trey Mancini was there. And then a few days prior to that, I was at Bowie and I saw Gunnar Henderson, who was playing, I believe, shortstop that day. He's been swapping back and forth between shortstop and third base. He's still only 20 years old. He hit a home run off Daniel Espina, who had.
Is that where Haskins is playing? Hunter Haskins. He's having a monster year.
Yeah, he's having a nice year.
What's his first name?
Hudson
Haskins.
Yeah, he's an outfielder. Jordan Westberg is also there, and you're going to start to see these guys.
They're going to be here,
probably not before too long. I would say certainly by next year. A lot of these guys that we're discussing, and so I'm ready to get back out there, get back out to Bowie, get back out to Aberdeen, start seeing a little bit more of these guys. But yeah, I was excited. That was an exciting game to go to with you at Aberdeen. Yeah.
I made the comment after watching that team, Ross, and I've been watching Oriole minor league games since the mid 80s when I started being Stan the Fan on the radio. I would start to go down, and I can never really remember coming away with more than one player to keep an eye on. The other night, they had the leadoff hitter was Connor Norby. The second batter was Rutschman, who we know is on a rehab, so he's below where his talent level is. Then this guy Mayo hit this monstrous home run, and Colton Cowser had 3/4 of a cycle. I said it's the best 4 hitters in the lineup in an Oriole minor league game that I've ever seen personally, that I thought all 4 will be solid contributors at the major league level. Some of them might be used to trade for stuff. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's what you talk to a lot of the scouts, and Aberdeen, aggressive team. Big thing, they're athletic. They're a lot of them are big, strong kids, which hadn't been something that's happened in the past. With the Orioles, they got speed. They hit mistakes. They're a good defensive group. They run the bases well. That's one of the things in the minor leagues. You don't see a lot of guys. A lot of teams do a lot of missing cutoff men, throwing to the wrong base. They not covering first. You see a lot of stuff, a lot more, because usually the guys aren't on the field like they used to be. So it's a little bit different. But this group, very impressive. And like you said, hopefully some of these guys are, will pan out. Because a lot of some prospects don't pan out. Things happen at different levels to them, and they hit their peak, and they don't handle some situations like you would hope. But that's the way it is, But the Orioles have a lot of good players, and hopefully they have enough to make a difference at the big league level in the future.
And I just want to say one thing about Coby Mayo. It's Coby, C-O-B-Y, Mayo. He was drafted in, I believe, the second round, Luke, and they paid over slot for him.
I think he was the fourth. Yeah, he was the 4th round pick in 2020.
Okay, and they paid him about $700,000 more than his slot would have called upon. But they needed to do that because I think he had committed to Georgia Tech or Florida State.
He was University of Florida. Where he had a strong college commitment to the University of Florida, and he was in the same draft as Carter Baumler, who had a strong college commitment to TCU.
And they got both of those guys.
To get him.
And Baumler has had the Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, he's still in Florida. Yeah.
The night before Luke and I saw him, he had hit 2 home runs that night. The night we saw him, he hit this monstrous, like Mark McGwire-esque home run. And then the next night, Luke texts me and says he did it again. He hit another home run. So he hit 4 home runs in 3 games. He's like looking at body-wise, it was like looking at Dale Murphy. A really big guy. Big guy.
So he's listed at 6'5", 215, which is probably what he was when he signed when he was 18 years old. I'm guessing right now, based on what I've seen, he's probably more like 6'6", 225. This is a big third baseman. This is a big 20-year-old. I don't know what he's going to end up at like when he's 23, 24 years old, but this is a big, powerful kid. And I don't know whether he's going to end up at third base. I don't know. And he's got a pretty good arm. Maybe it's right field. Maybe it's first base. Maybe he could stick at third. I don't know. But that's the sort of, and you were talking, Stan, about how big and physical these prospects that we saw were, and that's something that we hadn't seen in the past. And that's something that actually Brandon Hyde has brought up, that when he sees these prospects, he's like, we're a lot more physical down there than we were when I took over.
Ross,
that he's seen as well.
Ross, you remember the late Sid Thrift?
Yes, absolutely.
Sid pulled me aside, and he talked to, oh gosh, darn it, and talked with that Southern drawl.
I worked for him when I was with the Orioles.
And I'm out at a minor league game with him one day, and this is when he was an assistant to Pat Gillick before Gillick left, and then Kevin Malone left, and they made him the general manager. But at the time, he was saying, he says, now look at Akron over there. Look at how big those guys are. Now he goes, look at Bowie over here, our guys that we signed. He goes, they're all much smaller. He goes, doesn't it just make sense that they should be bigger? And I will tell you that this Kobe Mayo fits the bill on bigger. Hey, the article is, it takes a leader, not article, it's a cover story of the 274th issue of Press Box. It'll be on the stands for about another 6 weeks. Grab it, or you can read it online, PressBoxOnline.com. Luke Jackson did a great job. Ross, next week we're going to have the aforementioned number 24 from the Baltimore Orioles, Rick Dempsey, is going to join us next week. He had a golf tournament this week, so I said, well, why not get it from the horse's mouth?
Right.
And Luke, we thank you for coming on and telling us about this, what went into this story. It's really a terrific story.
It is.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We want to remind everybody we were brought to you by tonight, the Costas Inn, 4100 North Point Boulevard, 410-477-1975. Go to their menu online, costasin.com. You can order great carryout at the Costas Inn. Of course, you can still go there and sit down and eat and watch the ball games there. A lot of families now like to grab the food, take it home, and it's always well packaged and tasty. For Luke Jackson, Ross Grimsley, I'm Stan the Fan. We will see you next Monday night with Rick Dempsey. I'll be on Thursday night with another Zoom. Okay? See you soon, guys.